Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Jim Fleisig. During today's show, we will discuss mobility strategies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Tom Mills, the Chief Systems Engineer at Customs and Border Protection at DHS, Dave Rubin, the Director, Service Engineering, Department of Justice, R. Sandoon, the Division Chief, Mobile Commuting Program at Department of State, Mark McNulty, the Vice President, Motorola Solutions, Sean Frazier, the Technical Evangelist for Federal at Mobile Iron, and James Poole, Federal Director, Panasonic Mobility. We're talking mobility solutions in government. Let's get into the issues, guys, and let's talk about where we see some progress being made with mobility. Let's start with Tom Mills over CBP. Tom, give us some areas where you see progress being made at CBP in the use of mobility.
That's a great question, Jim. So lots of progress being made in use of mobility, specifically at CBP. We're adopting mobile solutions a lot in our inspections program. So one of the key highlights that we've done, deploying mobile devices to our agricultural specialists, to our officers out in the ports. We've moved inspections away from a paper-based inspection system where we had clipboards and recording findings on paper and then having the officers come back and key into the systems. They're actually taking mobile tablets out to the inspection sites, being able to record. We've seen lots of time savings. We've seen lots of ability to focus more on inspections, less on the paperwork. So that was a big success story.
I know
for
from
us.
my time in law enforcement, the paperwork was always everyone hated that paperwork stuff. So I'm sure it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've also seen a lot of progress in mobile solutions. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the fact that we're incorporating a lot of biometrics into our entry and exit process.
Correct. I've been reading a lot about that.
Absolutely. So we're using those mobile solutions to record entries, exits, and putting mobile devices into the hands of the officers so that you're no longer tied to a traditional primary inspection booth that you've seen in the past.
Very cool. I'm sure efficiencies and things like that are going to skyrocket with some of these things. Dave Rubin over at Justice. Dave, tell us some progress you see being made in your area over there in using mobility.
Sure. Well, Jim, first, thanks for having me. So across the department, we're doing a lot of great things with mobility, specifically around life safety, enhanced mission operations, improving our overall compliance posture, and really ensuring we have a mobily enabled workforce. Our workforce is global, and we want to make sure that we're empowering our personnel, whether you're an agent, whether you're an analyst, or whether you're an attorney, with the latest and greatest technology. Overall use of commercial mobile devices has been benefiting, the department for many, many years. People traditionally were looking at these mobile devices as an administrative tool, not as an investigative asset, and that's where we're shifting everything. To truly move towards mobility at mission speed, we need to take a look really across the board to see what do we need to do to empower our workforce outside of the office. They should not have to go back to the office to do these administrative type functions. So that was a really big thing for us in terms of having a common shared MDM, which we have across the entire department, taking a look at our platforms, our overall frameworks for development to ensure that we're moving product out there a lot quicker. We're also evolving it from a land mobile radio perspective. So a lot of our law enforcement components are using land mobile radio, of course, throughout the entire country. So we're looking at more of the IP-based radio. So we can have first responders come together and surge on an operation, and they can be anywhere. So we're really doing really big, tremendous things.
Really cool stuff. That's like a setup for our next panelist here. Mark McNulty at Motorola. I guess when you think Motorola, you think mobility. I mean, and as Dave mentioned, land mobile radio and moving towards IP-based radios, things like that. Tell us the progress you see, Mark, in this space.
So I'll thank Dave for the tee-up. So obviously we've got a huge heritage in LMR, offering its own set of mobility for voice and data. And by the way, with it comes a high level of security and reliability and ease of use, which has historically been easy to do because they've largely been more closed systems. Everything from continuity of supply chain and knowledge of where the components are coming from and how it gets here and everything else has been easy to track, which allows us to keep it highly secure. and again, being a closed system allows for security. There's a lot of good progress both in DHS as the components there modernize their networks with IP-based LMR networks, as well as within DOJ. There's enterprise efforts there, and there's enterprise efforts across Department of Defense with both Navy and Army looking at more enterprise approaches to LMR, leveraging IP. As we leverage IP for backhaul and connectivity of traditional LMR networks, obviously it brings some efficiencies. It also introduces some new risks. So obviously there's a lot of work going on in the cyberspace to make sure that we continue to secure those networks and achieve ATOs across the government. And then, if I can take kind of a look forward, the progress we're making is how do we take the things that we've learned from our traditional role in the cellular business that we're no longer in, and the LMR space, and bring that into the new world with things like FirstNet and connecting traditional, now IP-based LMR networks with a FirstNet network. So it doesn't matter what that investigator or what that attorney is using, which device they're using or which network they're on, we can connect them and maintain security end to end.
Excellent. Well said. Sounds exciting. Har Sandhu, tell us about progress being made over at State Department and some of the things going on over there.
First, Jim, thank you for giving us opportunity to discuss mobility in our department. So at the Department of State, mobility has been at the center stage for the last, 2 to 3 years. It has been our number one priority, and we are dead centered on making our diplomat a mobile diplomat. So having said that, we want to give our employees real-time information anywhere, any place. So some of the key areas where we have made progress over years is remote access, mobile and remote access. Initially, we started, as every federal agency, with BlackBerries, and that's pretty much it.
Through the traditional evolution.
Yes, and just all you can get is email. So we introduced iPhone, iPads about 2 years ago, and we are on the cusp of introducing Android devices in the next couple of months. Also expanding our remote access capabilities. And key other area is the mobile apps. A year ago, we had only about 2 mobile apps in our enterprise app store. Now we have over 20, and there are about 15 or 20 in the pipeline. So we are seeing big shift in our components at Department of State pushing, making their legacy applications moving over to, and cloud also, we're moving over to cloud.
Absolutely.
And so we are, a lot of services that we are inheriting from cloud is mobile enabled. So, and I think other key thing is our new CIO is putting a lot of effort in Wi-Fi. So it helps mobility directly. So we have over 20 overseas posts, they're Wi-Fi enabled. I think next year.
Yeah, we had your CIO on the show.
Oh, great. So next year or so, we are trying to double it, go to close to 100, and all the annexes here domestically, they are getting wired or infrastructure for Wi-Fi also.
Excellent.
So that's good.
Good. Sean Frazier, tell us about Mobile Iron and how you support your customer base in this world of mobility.
Sure, absolutely. I think, for me personally right now is the most exciting time in public sector mobility that we've ever had, right?
I think so too.
I think Har hit on the point that we all started doing BlackBerry stuff with email years ago. Email was the first killer app. It was the first reason to get something mobile in someone's pocket, which was very helpful for knowledge workers and for tactical folks to be able to do their jobs. I think what we're seeing now is the shift from that first app to the explosion of applications. And I think the applications are what really is going to drive mobile even further. Dave talked about some of the cool applications that DOJ is doing and putting in the hands of folks. But if you look across public sector, every agency is mobile inherently. Right? You've got knowledge workers that sit at desks, but for the most part, people are in the field doing things. And it used to be they'd go in the field, do their job, come back to a desk, do all that funny paperwork and stuff that they had to do. Now they don't have to do that. Now it's in their pocket. So everything that they do for their life and for their business is with them every second of every day, which is awesome to me.
Right. We've talked at this show in the past that the world we're living in is, decision-making time, T is approaching 0 in terms of the amount of time to make decisions these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the next logical extension of that is this thing that we like to call IoT, or Internet of Things, and wearables and things that are actually doing, which it, again, enhances some of the things that the people are doing in the field. Right now, they're kind of companion devices to their mobile devices. The in the future, they'll be standalone. So things like Google Glass and all these things being standalone, controllable, securable devices will, again, just to extend what the folks can do.
Right. Excellent. Sounds great. Yeah, we do a show on Internet of Things, too. Come talk about that stuff at that show, too. James Poole, Panasonic. James, tell us a little bit about how Panasonic plays in the space and the kind of things you're doing to support your customer base.
Before I start off, first of all, thank you, Jim, for inviting us here. So we've seen a lot of trends over the past several years within mobile technology in the federal government. First, the adoption of that technology. We've been in the mobile game for 20 years now with Panasonic. I remember when I first started in the mobile game, we were selling computers to the federal government or tablet devices, and they wanted the wireless ripped out of the devices. Right. So just having the capability to keep the wireless in and understand the technologies there, but the real-time data sharing, the understanding of the efficiencies for the mobile worker has really come a long way. What Panasonic, what we do, what's unique is we provide the hardware for the federal mobile workers. So you have to think about the use cases and the environment. In some cases, your standard consumer grade phone or tablet isn't going to work at a port inspection or in theater on a battlefield, and that's what we bring to the federal government.
Fantastic, fantastic. I love this subject, largely because I take credit for inventing wireless. Many of you may not know that. But, the other thing that's interesting to me, and maybe it's only interesting to me, is things that used to be wired are now wireless, and things that used to be wireless are now wired. For example, television was always wireless, antenna on the roof. Now it's all cable wired. Telephones were always wired. Now they're wireless. Computers were always wired. Now they're all going Wi-Fi wireless. It's interesting to me, okay? All right, Harsh, Sandhu, let's talk about a specific program. Our listening audience likes to hear about progress, but they always say, can you name a program where mobility is making a big difference? What comes to mind?
So first thing comes to my mind is our remote access solution that we have. It started off about 3-4 years ago with pretty much as a telework solution, telework for not an essential system. In the last year, 2 years, it has become a kind of a core system for the department. To give an example, during the president inauguration, all the department was closed and was encouraged to do telework. And guess what? Only system we had available was our virtual desktop remote. We call it Go, and we had over 6,000 concurrent users at a given, pretty much whole day, and also about 8,000 to 9,000 different users. So it was a huge success and kind of show of mobility that you can do work from remotely, and it was a huge success, and it also gave us ability to pitch mobility to our senior execs, and they've been very receptive of it. Other program I think it just came to my mind is our service desk. It's great to offer services, mobile services, but you need to be able to support it. And I'm really proud of our team. We got ISO 20K certification last year, which means it's going through intensive processes, repeatable processes, to be able to show that efficiencies and effectiveness of the service desk. And last year, looking at the performance numbers, we were able to resolve 85% of the calls first time when users call.
Excellent.
So it's unheard of, and we have created thousands of knowledge articles, training material, which is paying a lot of dividend in terms of educating our customers.
Excellent, excellent. With mobility, I don't know when I work. I have no idea when I work. I guess I'm working now. But you walk around with devices, and days don't mean anything anymore. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. You kind of work whenever you get somebody hit you up with an email or a text message, whatever. Dave Rubin, Justice, if I ask you name a program where you think mobility is making a big difference at Justice, what comes to mind?
Sure. Well, first, I'll key red at the department level. So we're aggressively moving towards Office 365 across the department. So we're even looking at the administrative type applications. So your traditional native email or calendar, contacts, and we're looking to evolve that with a lot of the Office 365 applications. So to use more of that enriched experience that people expect to have from their desktop. right? They want to be able to do all the additional things that they got from their native app, on the desktop, to be able to expand that and extend it into the
And you want
mobile
it to look the same
ecosystem.
way.
Exactly. I want our personnel to be able to instant message from their desktop and receive it on their mobile device.
Right.
To be able to make a phone call and do all the various things that solution provides us. The other areas that really are key are in our customer components. So some of our components specifically are really internal crowdsourcing for their app development, which is incredible. So they're pulling in, whether it's their agent or analyst or attorney, to find out, hey, what is really going to help you perform your mission? And do that outside of the office. So they are part of these agile development iterations. They're doing things in 2-week sprints, 30 or 60-day release cycles to put out really mission-enhancing applications. But we're doing things in a standardized and framework environment, which is really key.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that we're moving, again, away from all the paper and bring that into a digital kind of ecosystem, if you will, where the content owner, whether you're sitting on different verticals within criminal or counterterrorism, other things, can just update that content on the fly. So you're not redoing an entire application, you're just feeding that in real time. So that is really, really key, and it's also helping us put out product a lot faster.
Excellent, excellent. Tom Mills, how about at CBP? Tom, if I say, what program comes to mind where mobility is making a big difference in the CBP programs?
So I think one of the big things that we've done in CBP that has been pretty successful, this is at the direction of our CIO, we actually centralized our mobile development and mobile application development program into a center of excellence. So one of the things that, and I think Dave has kind of alluded to it, a lot of the sharing of code, sharing of knowledge, sharing of peripherals, how we connect peripherals to mobile devices is all done through the Center of Excellence now. So we've created this Center of Excellence that really is a collaboration point for mobile application development and also for connecting and use of mobile applications.
Yeah, it sounds right. That almost dovetails on what Dave was saying, where you were talking about standardizing so things that are being done correctly. Center of Excellence sounds like similar concept. Let's start doing things, as an enterprise, as opposed to...
It is, and we've done the same kind of concepts, 2-week sprints. All the development is agile, and I think by having all the application development shops contribute to this Center of Excellence, it's actually not only helped us in identifying the really good apps that our agents and our officers would like to use, but it also helped perpetuate agile development and help perpetuate standards and templates and all that good stuff.
Continuous improvement processes. James Poole, if I asked you to pick a program that you're aware of out there that you think mobility is making a big difference, what comes to mind, James?
I'll tell you, we have one of our largest customers right in studio with us here with Customs and Border Protection. They're agricultural specialists. We heard Tom mentioned it earlier, outfitting them with tablet devices so that they can inspect and protect the ports for agricultural products that come into the United States. And then even beyond that, we're building on the applications and developing attachments or accessories for the hardware that would allow them to grow the use cases for the hardware that they've invested in.
Yeah, very
so
cool.
it's an exciting project.
Yes, it is. Sounds exciting. I want to hear from our other two industry guests too, but we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Fleisig here with Tom Mills from CBP, Dave Rubin from Justice, Har Sandhu from State, Mark McNulty from Motorola Solutions, Sean Frazier from Mobile Iron, and James Poole from Panasonic. We're talking mobility. We were talking about specific programs. We went to break. We had not heard from Sean or Mark. Let's start with Sean. Sean, what program comes to mind when I ask you to identify a program where mobility is making a difference?
Oh goodness, there's a ton. So we've been working very close. We've been working very closely with USDA, with DISA on some of their programs around getting devices into people's hands, tactical devices as well as knowledge workers. I want to key on something that Dave and Tom were talking about, though, that I think it's pretty important to hit on, which is, I think, and we see this in DoD and we see this in civilian, we see kind of cloud and mobile being the peas and carrots, right? I mean, they kind of come in together. If you look at what happened in the consumer world, most applications that live on a mobile device have a data component that lives somewhere, and in most cases it's in the cloud.
Right.
And I think mobile's kind of forcing the public sector to do a few things. One is to kind of acknowledge that and move a little bit to cloud. And where do we always start? It's always email, so it's going to be your Office 365, and then you're going to move beyond that to collaboration and other cool stuff. But the other thing it's doing is it's requiring folks like Tom to build that center of excellence, because it's really requiring folks to move a lot faster than they've ever been used to moving.
Right.
I kind of liken it to the legacy Windows world that we used to live in, even when it was laptops. It was a kind of a different world. Now Microsoft is kind of bringing their platform to mobility versus the other way around, which is kind of forcing all of us to move a lot faster. So customers like USDA, DISA, we're doing a project with DHS S&T around wearables and
Cool.
IoT. So all of that stuff is just exploding. The number of applications that this stuff can apply to is really
Yeah,
limitless.
it really is. I mean, I think there's things we haven't even thought of yet that are going to be happening down the road here. Mark McNulty over at Motorola, if I ask you, what program comes to mind you think is pretty cool, doing some neat stuff?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple earlier in the progress question, but obviously, across DHS, the CBP RIPS program, which is their radio over IP program, is a big modernization effort for them. Similar efforts at ICE, and there's a highly anticipated award coming hopefully soon out of Federal Protective Service. So, but again, more around the traditional LMR type of applications, but leveraging IP transport. I think the other one, and we've talked about it before as well, is FirstNet. Obviously, states are starting to opt in. That program is going to get a lot of legs, and federal users are considered co-primary users to police, fire, and EMS. So its application for federal law enforcement to be able to get priority and preemptive service on both AT&T's existing commercial network as well as the new band class 14 that they'll build out is pretty exciting. And then, I'll make another plug for a program up at NSA, the Commercial Solutions for Classified program, where we've had some success in a program that we did for one of our federal law enforcement agencies that we obviously can't talk about. But I think what that program demonstrated is that we can layer multiple commercially available security solutions together and really achieve the same high level of security that we were getting out of almost government purpose-built devices in the past.
That's fantastic, because there's truly a need for that type of security on top of the mobility. Let's talk about some of the things you learn along the way. What we'd like to do in the show is let our listening audience hear about some of the lessons you're learning along the way that might help them along as they work their way through this program. Let's start with Dave Rubin this time at Justice. Dave, what are a couple of the lessons you're learning as you build these programs out?
Sure, Jim. So some of the biggest things that we really have learned with this is really understanding and engaging with our customer, understanding what their expectations are, engaging with them early, and also making sure that you have great partnerships, with private sector, with your vendors. As you know, to make these devices function, you have 5 or 6 vendors, at the table to ensure that it's going to really meet your requirements. So that is really key, especially when you're going to make big decisions on where you're going to go and how things are going to evolve. Make sure you try to really embrace lean methodologies. Do things in iterative fashion, so you're showing quick wins, so your customer can see the value.
Don't do the Big Bang Theory and have them wait for 2 years for something.
Exactly, and especially as you're shifting with a lot of organizations towards more of a DevOps type posture, that'll enable you to really be agile, and that's key. And those small and try to, and this is one of the biggest challenges, try to be as agnostic as you can. So if you're building, applications, try to make sure that those platforms will cross between, iOS, Android, and the like, to make sure that you have a truly you have a unified and standardized experience across platforms.
Good. Tom Mills, lessons you're learning along the way you might want to pass on.
Sure. Some of the biggest lessons, and I think Dave kind of touched on this a little bit too, is standardized frameworks. Really, when we started, it was multiple development teams building kind of on their own frameworks, and lots of churn. It actually ended up slowing us down. So having a standardized framework, using style guides, I think were a big benefit to us and a big lesson learned. We also look at architectural mandates. We did push to try to be as device agnostic as possible, but in some instances where our Border Patrol happens to use iOS devices, and if we use iOS devices, let's build an iOS application so that we can leverage and use everything inherent in the platform that's out there. So we originally came out with mandates that said be device agnostic. We've now kind of reversed and said, well, if there's an application that takes advantage of inherent abilities within an Android platform or an iOS platform or even the Windows mobile platform, we'll actually build the app to be native to that platform that we're building on.
Yeah,
So,
I guess it's nice, but it's impossible to picture any large organization where everyone has the exact same device. I mean, this ain't going to happen. But excellent points.
and then some of the other lessons learned is around how we develop and publish applications that are available to the public as well. So again, a lot of that style guides, the standard frameworks are a big deal. We just recently put out a public application called CBP Jobs that allows applicants that are coming in to become frontline officers, agents, and air and marine agents to actually track the status of their application as they're going through the
excellent
application process. So
a lot less phone calls to the personnel department.
yeah, absolutely.
Good one. Very good. Harv, Sandu?
Where should I start? I was a lot younger and had a lot of hair before I took on a mobility
Well,
program.
give us your top 3 lessons then, Eric.
Okay, great.
Keep
So
it.
I think Tom and Dave touched on customer experience, keeping customer in mind, and also there's so many fluctuation in mobile market. New things are coming in. Just honing in on the key feature sets that customers are looking at, initially getting that out quickly and then worrying about good to have things.
New toys every day. I feel like my kids, they want the new device. Why do you need it? Well, because everyone else has it.
And also, keeping an end goal in mind, having a big picture, having the whole ecosystem in your mind, how are you going to take steps towards it? Because, when BlackBerry, was going under, a lot of departments, panicked and selected one, and next future, and didn't look at all the variables where they want to go. So a lot of, and including us, had to relook at our strategies and making sure we pick the right platform. Other key thing is security, and it's becoming a prime.
Yeah, we'll probably hit that in challenges too.
Yes, and it's for us. We look at physical security, for device security, and also from policies perspective. You need to get them involved up front. Even when you're having discussions with them, letting them know what you're trying to achieve, it will help you tremendously in getting the products out quicker and faster. And last thing, Dave mentioned about being proactive. New device comes in, or OS is released every other week, and how to stay on top of the game, and having a relationship with vendors and also with the device manufacturer. So it's a kind of a puzzle, and you have to make sure you keep everything in line.
Yeah, I'm sure that too, but that then belongs in lessons and challenges. Sean Fraser, what are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here?
I'm with Har. I think the list is endless on things that we've learned. I think
Can you give us a top 2 then?
Yeah, the biggest things are the mobility doesn't act like anything else. And I think initially you try to kind of fit mobility into the traditional IT management role, it didn't fit. Right? I mean, we're used to Windows desktops and laptops where you had this gold image process where you'd re-image these things. You could wait to deliver things to end users because you were the ones building that. Mobility changed the game and basically flipped it on its head, where the user was responsible for a lot more of IT than they ever were in the past. They could go to Best Buy and buy a device. In most cases they did, and say, how do I get stuff on this device? In the public or in the private sector, there was this big thing called BYOD, or bring your own device, which took off like wildfire. It's kind of ebbed a little bit. It never really has been able to take off in public sector for privacy reasons and other reasons, but it still is bringing the users more in the conversation of IT around the management of the things that they carry, and it's almost a religious experience with mobility. People have a deep affection for the devices they have. If you're an iOS guy, you're an iOS guy. If you're an Android guy, you're an Android guy. So you're forced to do this heterogeneous thing with 3 platforms, and Windows is always there, iOS is there, Android is there. You can't just homogenize into one thing anymore. So I think the lesson learned is is to deliver these services, but deliver them in a way that is accepted in the platform. Don't fight the platform.
Right. No. Excellent point. Excellent point. I fight with my kids. I'm Android. They're Apple, and we argue all the time which one's better and this, that, and the other thing. And I cost them extra money because when they text to the Android from the Apple, it's I won't bore you with the details. James Poole, lessons learned.
So a couple of lessons that I've seen, and all of our federal panelists brought it up, was really understanding the end user and the end user environment, and really bringing them into either the source selection or understanding that we have different use cases based on the environment and where the mobile device is being used, whether it's globally or it's the office commuter, going home on the metro every evening. And then from a Panasonic perspective, we look to help tackle some of the challenges that we see within some of the federal agencies. Logistics, security challenges, really sharing what we've learned from our public sector customers and from our private enterprise customers to really help create the efficiencies to make sure that your project or program goes off flawlessly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Try to do some homework and understand what are the issues in the agency and how can we use mobility to address some of those issues. Mark McNulty, lessons you're learning along the way.
Well, nice thing about going last is you can build off of things that everybody else said. I like the theme of focusing on the user, and I think to the extent that they're all users of technology and mobility in their own personal lives, it's about minimizing complexity because they expect it to be just as simple to use at work as it is at home where they're getting help from their kids.
Sure.
Har mentioned security, Dave mentioned productivity, which I'll equate productivity with usability.
Right.
And historically there's been this binary, well, you either get usability with no security or low security, or you get really high usability, but you get really high security and it's very difficult to use. I think what we've learned and where we're going is in a direction where we're going to get a high level of usability and still achieve very high levels of security.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. You talk about knowing the user. I'll tell you a real quick story. When I ran Secret Service Communication, I was showing a new radio to the head of the president's detail and how these really neat buttons you can do all this stuff on, whatever. And and he's staring at me, takes the radio and throws it at my lap and said, "Jim, they're going to be shooting at me. You want me playing with these buttons? I want to push the button and I want it to work. That's the requirement." I learned a lesson in knowing your user that particular day. Let's talk about challenges and constraints and the tough things out there. Let's start this time again with Tom. What are some of the challenges you face day to day in trying to get mobility to where you're trying to get it?
Yeah. So obviously, I think one of the biggest ones, and I think we've all mentioned it out here, is around ensuring that these devices are secured. So security is a big concern, especially with the perpetuation of apps that traditionally resided within a desktop where we're collecting a lot of information on people. So security is a big challenge for us, and that's one where we work with our industry partners hand in hand in making sure that devices, apps, the way we develop the applications are all secure and trusted.
Sure,
because
absolutely.
we're collecting a lot of information on people.
Sensitive data in there, law enforcement data and so forth being passed around.
Absolutely, and I think a little bit of challenges we've seen, and we kind of alluded to this as well, is mobility does change the game a lot. What people seem to forget is you have a device, you're collecting information, but you're still persisting that information somewhere, and in a lot of instances on cloud, a lot of instances on data centers that we manage. So there's a lot of external dependencies that you need to take into account for developing and pushing out mobile apps.
Yeah.
So there are things that you have to consider
lot
around
to think
firewall
about.
openings and how you push traffic through trusted internet connections, all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Excellent points. Dave Rubin, what do you think in terms of challenges that you face day to day that you still have to overcome to really be where you want to be?
Sure. I think it comes down to achieving mobility at mission speed. So,
I like that.
Being able to...
Plagiarize that from time to
please feel free. Just give me credit for that, Jim. So it really comes down to, right now, we're always competing with the other device in our customer's pocket. And to be able to understand the overall complex, commercial ecosystem is a big challenge for us.
Right.
So many times you'll have an OS update, and then we'll have to get in front of it and do some regression testing to ensure that our apps and everything function correctly, while maintaining that standardized user experience across the board is a big challenge for us. We like to really coin kind of the notion of corporately owned but personally enabled devices.
Corporately owned, personally enabled.
Right, pretty much like the opposite of BYOD.
You write down all these
Right.
lists.
Yeah, sure.
Future shows.
So the reason why that's important for us is we want people to have one device. That one device to be the only thing on their belt, especially with a lot of our agents. They're carrying enough things there. I don't want them to carry their personal phone.
Right.
I want them to be able to do everything that they need, because I'm thinking about privacy and security of that individual, especially when it comes down to life safety. We want to make sure that we know what's going on that device. As these apps are updating, how many times you look on your personal phone and you'll see you have X amount of updates pending for you. I want to make sure that those updates and the things that are going to occur on that device, I have a sense of what's going on.
Right.
So that's really, really key for us.
Excellent points here. R. Sandoon, what are some of the challenges you face?
So, they pretty much mentioned a couple of the main ones already. So I will, say the cultural change is a huge for us. It continues to be like a new generation that's coming in. Only thing they want is mobile devices.
Right.
Whereas legacy staff that we have at Department of State, they just want to keep what they have. So it's for example, we were just trying to consolidate. We have a project called EMD, Enterprise Mobile Desktop. What we're trying to do is converge desktop with mobile, and some of the things that we ran into is they will never let go of the desktop because it's stationary. They can come in and use it, and they just used to it. So cultural shift is a huge, not just from customer perspective, also from the IT perspective, because there are stovepipes or the environment has been set with the desktop certain way. So it's people resist change. So
Absolutely.
another part is we're looking at is asset management becomes a huge issue for us because we are global. A majority of our employees are overseas, about 65 to 70%. How do we manage those devices, know who has it
very good
when
point.
lost and got stolen? So
Oh, excellent. And you hit the magic word. You're all too young to remember Groucho Marx, and you had the magic word. But the word culture, we've now done 154 shows, and 154 shows when we get to challenges, someone mentions culture. So thanks, Har, for keeping us consistent on that. I want to hear from our industry guests on this question too, but we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Fleisig here with Tom Mills from CBP, Dave Rubin from Department of Justice, R. Sandhu from Department of State, Mark McNulty from Mobile Solutions, Sean Frazier from Mobile Iron, and James Poole from Panasonic. We're talking mobility. We were talking about challenges when we went to break. We heard from our government guests. Let's hear some challenges from the perspective of our industry guests. James, what are some of the challenges you see every day that still need to be overcome to be where you want to be?
I think the biggest challenge we see is just general adoption of new mobile technology and really being able to move at have the federal government move at a faster pace. Sometimes governance, sometimes policy slows that down. We understand there's always security requirements,
Right.
But there's a lot of cutting edge mobility technology that's coming to the market, and so as a partner of the federal government, we're always trying to be the evangelist to help move to those newer technologies.
Yeah, I bet. And the technology changes so fast, and government processes to keep up with that is going to be a real challenge. Sean Frazier, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges you see out there?
So I think it's been discussed. I think Dave hit the nail on the head when he said the challenge is the other device that you're competing with in someone's pocket. You know, we call this in our market, we call it shadow IT, where you've got users who will kind of, if you don't give them the tools they need, they will find a way to do what they need to do. So that presents its own set of challenges with being able to give them what they need at a rapid pace, as James points out. The other challenge for public sector is moving fast enough, because I guarantee you Apple's not waiting for you, Google's not waiting for you. They're doing all these different things. Yeah. And when these users see these new whiz-bang fagled features when they go buy their device at Best Buy, they want to see the same thing on their government device. Absolutely. I saw something a few years ago that kind of changed for me. It was interesting to kind of reinforce this point, which was I used to see, you go to these government conferences and you'd see people carrying a BlackBerry and an iPhone, right? They had their agency device and then have their personal iPhone. Right. Now I see people carrying 2 iPhones. So they're still carrying 2 devices. They just happen to be the same device, right? So one is their agency device and the other one is a personal device. So I think that in and of itself is a big challenge.
Yeah, I've seen some demos of products that have like the serendipity devices, applications, and the business. If you hit a business application, it shuts off everything that's a personal application. If you go to a personal app, it shuts off the business app, so forth. Yeah, things like that I think are going to come.
And I think you need to kind of trust the tools that are given to you, right? We're a tool, you know, right. Apple and Microsoft and Google give you tools to do exactly that, where you can kind of containerize things, put an extra layer of security around things so that you can trust the fact that maybe my data is okay.
Right. Mark McNulty, how about some challenges that you see, Mark, that you still feel like you need to sort of like get over that hurdle to get where you want to be?
Yeah, I'd like to echo the whole, the discussion on pace, right? The ability David mentioned, moving at the pace of, mobility at the pace of mission. James also talked about, right, the government's ability to move quickly. That's obviously one of them. A second one I would add is, and we haven't really dug too much into cloud, but there's this, what we see as silos of information, right? And those silos, I think we need to continue to find better ways of sharing data in a way that people feel is secure, right. And not compromised, right? Whether that's anonymization or other techniques that are out there. And coupled with that around cloud, we hear a lot about cloud. I would say we hear a lot about cloud from executives right. within agencies, but when you get down to users, they still want, this needs to be in my data center. We're not using cloud. We're not going there. So I think that's the other thing, that having both cloud data sources as well as non-cloud in private data centers creates those silos of information, which, by the way, creates additional challenges around, because now we've got to authenticate to 2 different sets of data or multiple sets of data. And so I think that authentication and how we ease that authentication in a multi-factor authentication kind of world, and how do we leverage biometrics? How do we leverage, by the way, there's AI that will be coming out, right, where we can leverage gestures. The carriers use behaviors to be able to know whether or not that's still the same person using that device, because they understand the apps you use and what order you use them, the places that you go. All of those things can be used to continuously authenticate who the user is without having to go through a 10-digit PIN and a 9-digit password.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I know. Before in getting ready for today's show, I was going through the trade press. I read where you guys are doing some things with artificial intelligence in the cameras, body-worn cameras and things like that, which is, I'm sure it'll be all kinds of neat stuff that can come out of that.
I'll give you a little bit of that in vision. How's that?
Okay, that's fine. Fine. Fair enough. All right, what we're going to do, we've got about 13 minutes left, which is perfect. What we like to do at the end of the show is sort of like ask a question, where's all this going? How will it change government? What will government look like down the road here as a result of this trend towards mobility? So I'm going to work our way right down to the table, and then I'll do a little closeout here. So let's start with James Poole at Panasonic. James, what's your crystal ball look like? What's your vision for out there, and how's this mobility going to change the way government works, and how will the world be different because of this?
Well, it's definitely going to add speed, efficiencies, and accountability for the federal government. And it's exciting to hear from all the panelists just the investments that are being made and the time and the energy. And from a strategy, at least from a mobile device strategy, I see moving towards a single device. We don't need to have the mission computer or the mission mobility product, the desktop administrative product, you know, your shadow IT product, as Sean said earlier, but really streamlining the efficiencies and then making sure that the federal government puts the governance and the policies and the funding from Congress to allow agencies to make these type of investments.
Yeah, it sounds excellent. Some of this talk about modernization funds and things like that, and that are coming certainly will help, especially in the funding side. Sean Fraser, where's this all going in your mind down the road as you look to the future and what the world will look like down the road as a result of this big push to mobility?
So in mobile, we look at everything in 6-month chunks, right? No one can see typically past 6 to 12 months at the outset. Obviously, IoT is kind of an overused term, but I see mobility being kind of the nucleus of supporting a lot of other things that live around it. So the watch and any kind of wearable type devices. But I also think that there's going to be an increased focus on security, specifically around identity. So how do you prove the person who's using it is supposed to be the person? And beyond that, I mean, the personal identity is only one aspect of it. So we tend to look at it across 3 different things where it's not only the person, but it's also the device and it's also maybe the application. You want to make sure that you can trust all 3 of those things, because even though it's the right person, they might not be using the right app, they might not be on the right device. But being able to do that in a seamless way, so it's like dial tone, so the user doesn't even know that you're doing it, that's the important thing.
Yeah, very good points. Very good points. And wait till the next generation coming up behind us gets into this workforce. Talk about expectations.
Snapchat.
Yeah, that's right. R. Sandhu at State Department. What's the vision for the future look like to you? Where's this all going?
So I think mobility is going to bridge the gaps of within the departments and also as a federal government. With the cloud services coming in, standardized services where you can leverage services one department has done with a lot of cost savings and efficiencies. So you will see bridging, and also end results you will see a mobile government where people walking has a tablet and able to do their functions regardless of their location. So with business intelligence, Watsons and Alexas of the world, the challenges for us will come is how you integrate those cloud-based services into business processes and services. Some of the other things we are really looking at is proactive monitoring of tools. Desktops, you have Norton antivirus and so kind of tools. What do we do on mobile devices, as everybody has devices to look at if there's a malicious code downloaded or something that quickly be able to react to it. TEM solution, telecommunication expense management is a key because service plans cost money, and so trying to keep check of asset management expenses. Drive credentials, and it's a huge thing for moving forward. You have a nice device, small device, you want to be able to not have another dongle or something, be able to carry your CAC card and stuff. So so that would be huge for us. Another thing, I think we are going to try to make a big leap of converging desktop into mobile platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there'll be a thing called a desktop in the future. Mark McNulty, I would think a company like Motorola is thinking to the future right now in terms of planning, but what can you share with us that without giving up company secrets?
Well, I think from a vision perspective, I think we certainly see a world where technology will enable mobility in a way where we're no longer making the compromise between usability and productivity and security. So that's obviously a space where, as we think about a FirstNet-enabled world for our first responders, where we're focusing a lot of time. And in that world, as I mentioned before, right, it's about connecting the networks and connecting those devices so the user may be using a purpose-built device for the role that they're currently performing in their job, but we know that those, based on mission, those roles that they perform and the devices that they might need to use to get the job done may vary throughout the workday and throughout the mission. We also see vertical-specific applications coming into fold, and how do we make them work together so it's not I got to back out of this app to get into this one. It's I can have a common work group that I'm associated with. I can push to talk with that work group. I can secure message that work group. I can whiteboard with them in a collaboration application and pivot back and forth between those things without having to exit one and enter another. You mentioned earlier and asked a question around AI. Obviously, we're doing some partnership in the marketplace with some AI users, combining that with body-worn video cameras and solutions that we're developing, and thinking about how do we move in that mobility world, how do we move some capability that today is done on the back end, how do we move more of that computing to the edge? And specifically around things like whether it's an Amber Alert, a BOLO, a Silver Alert, whatever it is, how do we add to that officer, that agent in a public setting, add to their own two eyes by downloading an image of that missing child to that body-worn camera.
Using like facial recognition.
Using AI, facial recognition, descriptions, whatever it is, to have the camera now looking for that individual or looking for that lost child. Alerting the officer, or in the case of getting a hit on maybe a wanted murder suspect or something like that, not only alerting the officer that this person matches the description, but having it automated on the back end where we immediately dispatch backup to that location. So a lot of work moving the computing through mobility to the edge.
Fantastic. Well said. Dave Rubin, what's it look like to you down the road? Where's this all going?
Sure. It's actually quite timely. We were just having a conversation about this with our DOJ Mobility Working Group, where a lot of our components are thinking about, what does, how is the workforce today, and of course the workforce of the future, they have an expectation of being mobile. Sure. So how do we, and what we've called our unified digital workplace, how do we get all of our companion apps and the overall customer experience to be standardized, across the environment? So you're able to be productive whether you're sitting on your laptop, and we have a lot of mobile users with laptops, moving and shifting over to your smaller mobile device to your wearable. The convergence of cloud and IoT, like was mentioned here, is really going to be interesting to see how all that stuff comes together. But largely I see the overall simplification of this. People want things to be intuitive. They want it to be easy. It's something that we've been working towards for quite some time. So to that end, I see it moving, and it's been said here about looking at our analytics and looking at things becoming more AI enabled, which is really going to be key. So whether we have an individual who's doing a search on someone and certain information pops up intuitively because it knows that you are looking at this as part of your case or as part of your work group and things of that nature, things that are more location based, so that they know if you're in a certain area and there's certain activity happening, how do we mine certain information to be able to make smart decisions. So that's what we see it going.
Very cool stuff. We might have to do a radio show sometime on artificial intelligence. So much stuff going on around that space. Tom Mills, what do you see down the road? What's it look like to you in that crystal ball?
So I think a lot of the comments made, again, good advantage of going last. You guys actually said a lot of the stuff that's already out there. Ditto on a lot, especially around the use cases and body-worn cameras, and having the body-worn cameras use facial recognition to be able to do alerting for officers and agents that are on the front line. Those are interesting use cases, and I think the whole perpetuation of IoT and connected devices and having those hooked to mobile devices that are used by our users are fantastic use cases and great visions for the future. For us also, we do deal a lot with the traveling public and the trading public. So for us, I think some of the visions of the future would be including streamlining both trade and and travel for the traveling public and for our trading partners, and using these mobile apps as ways to expedite traveling, people coming into the country for travel, and to expedite trade moving into the country as well.
Fantastic. Thanks. Let me do my best. I always try to summarize and try to pull out some of the points we heard today. When we were talking progress, what I heard was it's improving the field experience with the efficiencies that are out in the workforce in the field. Less of that dull paperwork, because you can get things done and not have to go back to the office and do that paperwork. And it's an empowerment issue, empowering those outside the office, because you have now the ability to get real-time information into their hands that they need for their jobs. And clearly we see the trend from LMR to IP-based communications. When we were talking some specific programs, we were talking about pretty much remote programs. Harry, you brought them up, telework and things like that. Service desk going remote. We talked about 365 apps going mobile and how mobility can be built around that. We heard about tablets for inspection, how inspections can be done right on the spot with the agriculture and others. And we heard about cloud and mobile coordination and how the attempt to move those two programs together. CBP RIPS program, I think, was brought up, their movement to IP-based systems. And of course, FirstNet, which is very, very visible in the public, that everybody is watching. And it's interesting because I think from the 1980s we were talking about, wouldn't it be nice that the public safety community and law enforcement had a network where they can all communicate together, and here it is, 30, 40 years later, and we're actually going to do it. Lessons that we're learning are understanding the customer came out big from pretty much all of you, as well as partnership with vendors. The security popped up with lessons as well as with challenges, as no surprise there. And we talked about uniqueness in the programs, that not everyone's going to have the exact same device, but what we need to do is understand the issues so that we can be agnostic and so we can have interoperability. Obviously, we don't want everybody doing their own thing either. When we talk challenges, we talked about adoption. We talked about the big one, culture. When you change things, or when you have people doing something different, you run into that resistance to change. It's just a natural phenomena. We talked about speed. You need to compete with these devices. They're getting faster and faster and faster. We need to be developing applications that are going to provide information faster and faster and faster. We talked about asset management being a challenge, especially when you have a worldwide footprint. Keeping track of these devices and where they are and who has them and so forth is a major challenge. When we look to the future, we talked about speed, efficiency. The Internet of Things came up, which is, we're talking today mostly thinking about traditional wireless, but Internet of Things will bring up. We talked about streamlining and integration. And what came across to me as the big thing, too, is we're really talking about saving lives in many cases with some of the comments that you made and really doing a service to help secure our country. With that, I want to first thank our panelists for taking time from your busy day to be here. Thank our sponsors for sponsoring the show. Without you, we don't have a show. The good people here at Fed News Radio and my good partner, Tom Trezin Media Group. And finally, last but not least, our most important people to thank are that listening audience that tune in each month and listen to our program. You have been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.